Story 1. Guilt. I've always lived a relatively normal life. I was the typical teenage girl. Though I was a tomboy, I had never once been a girly girl or dreamed of holding frilly pom-poms and being popular. That just wasn't my style. I much preferred to stay in my house, sitting in front of the TV, playing video games, or video games to be precise, anything that could scare me. I went after, though I loved the fear aspect of games and scary stories. I was easily paranoid. Thanks to this, I very seldom ever let myself feel safe. I was more so always in a state of hesitation, like a little mouse in a cat-infested home. My friends, family, all of them knew this wasn't healthy for me. No, not in the slightest. I didn't care about that, though. Fear enticed me, drew me in. My paranoia only grew, and I let it. I watched it grow, like the little fire it was in my heart, as I lay in bed on night, reading more creepy scriptures, whatever I could come across. Really soon, though, I had come to realize my throat felt dry and sore. I set down the laptop and started to try and massage it from the side, rubbing slowly with 2 fingers, but to no avail. I knew I had to go from the barely lit living room and into the dark kitchen that lay beyond the safe haven I had grown so used to these nights. My paranoia naturally did not ease up, but I knew I had to go and get something to drink, if only to ease the sore, dull burn I felt in my throat. With that, I slipped my legs over the side of the couch, flinching as my foot caught in the blanket I would sleep with. Thanks to my nearly tripping, my landing was not so quiet as I would have wished. I cursed under my breath. Boo. T shook it off. Really, I needed to get over it. It was only me and my dad in this old house. Anyway, heck, it wasn't even old, just a bit worn. Nothing to fear from a safe Washington RM family home. With that thought swimming in my mind, I made my journey to the kitchen, sure to flip on the lights the instant I entered the doorway. As I came to stand beside the fridge, I took a look to my left, looking over the blinds that covered the glass sliding doors. Despite the thick white blinds, I always felt something would be just outside the doors, able to see through some unknowable crack in the covering. The thought made chills run down my back, but I shrugged it off just as quick, turning my attention to the fresh bottle of water I had grabbed. Thanks to my prior hots, I knew it would be a long, sleepless night for me. Story 2. The Man in the Black Hat and Suspenders. As many stories here on Creepypasta start off, cliché or not, I have never told anyone these stories. This will be the first time I document them anywhere. I may have mentioned an event or two to a few buddies and lovers, but never the full story. I don't expect anyone to believe me, or even read this, or for it to get posted in general, but as others say, it's worth a try. I'm going to start off this document saying I am a 20-year-old psychology stud. ENT, ironically enough, I am completely sane, as anyone would defend themselves to be. I am not a writer, not a storyteller, and definitely not someone who is going to get off on people reading this. I am just someone passing along an experience. As a child, I witnessed some very traumatic events, being that my father would abuse my mother. Nearly took her life while I sat crying in the next room. I always felt that after surviving a situation like that, I could deal with just about anything. But now I know I'm wrong. When I was 5 years old, I started to experience what many Spanish British mothers would call guardian angels watching over me. It began with animals, seeing puppies hop around my bed at night and horses trot through my room. The best were when I saw roaches that weren't they're crawling up my walls. Many kids would think this was cool, but it freaked me out because I knew they weren't there. I'd tell my mother, and she'd chalk it up to over-imagina. Tie-in and early signs of being a veterinarian. Did I mention I major in psychology? By the time I turned 7 to 8 years old, I was only seeing the puppies, but they were much calmer. They'd sit in corners of my room or at the edge of my bed and hardly pay me any mind. So I stopped paying them any mind. The new experience was floating skulls and bones. You know that fuzzy vision you experience when you're about to get a killer migraine? Well, that's what these floating skeletons looked like. They were just out of my field of vision, and they floated from the ground to the ceiling. Now, before I go any earther, I lived in New York in a 6-story high apartment complex. This story isn't going to end with I discovered I was living on a pet cemetery that my house had been built on. No, I am just telling you what I saw. I'd tell my mother about these experiences, and she'd just say a prayer and send me back to bed. Never thought much of it besides overactive imagination and bad headaches. That's when it all stopped. Or at least I think. I can't remember having any experiences from the age of 8 to the age of 13. By the time I was in my last year of junior high, however, I was going through a pretty dark phase in life. No, I wasn't painting my nails black and dyeing my hair even darker, but I wore dark, baggy, unattractive clothes and lost myself in the zone of screaming music. My eyes had bags no matter how much I slept, and the word tan was not in my vocabulary. I was pale and dead-looking, and I couldn't understand why. This is when it began. I started waking up at night feeling as if my stepfather had come into my room. And I say stepfather because I would distinctively sense a male in the room. I thought maybe he's just checking up on me and my younger sister, and I'd peek over the bunk bed and I'd see him scurry out of the room realizing he had woke me up. Some nights he'd just stand in the doorway, cross his arms and watch us while we slept. I found it annoying, but I got used to it, and I would just turn over and fall back to sleep. I'm sure you can guess where this is going, but for those of you who can't, I am going to continue. It began to get on my nerves, being woken up at such late hours just because he wanted to make sure we were resting and not staying up all hours of the night. So I decided to complain, being that he was just my stepfather. I didn't have the confidence to corner him and tell him to knock it off. So I went to my mother. She thought it was strange immediately and asked me to explain. Mom, he comes in that tacky black hat and those black suspenders and just stands there for who knows how long. Jess, he's a construction worker. When do you ever see that man in suspenders or wearing a hat that isn't yellow and hard? And that, folks, is when it hit me. She was completely correct. Not to mention, I had never even seen this man's face or his clothes exactly. It was far too dark at night, yet I was able to completely explain what he was wearing and how he stood with his arms crossed. Maybe I've been having bad dreams. I'm stressed a lot lately. Never mind it, I remembered telling my mom, but she wouldn't brush it off so easily. She began asking questions and talking to family members about it. So I stopped telling her that it was happening. I'd still wake up in the middle of the night, and without even looking over at the corner of my room where the door was, I could tell it was there. Whatever it was, I'd just roll over and force myself to fall asleep. But I was scared. I couldn't take it anymore. For an entire week, the air in my room was heavy with anger and darkness that I just couldn't shake off. My younger sister never experienced any of this. It was just me. I did mention I was on the top bunk, right? Well, one night I was in a deep sleep, but was quickly awoken by the sensation of someone imping onto my bed and setting themselves at the edge. Funny side note, the ladder to get onto my bed was to my left. This sensation came from my right, the right side in which the bed was propped, paid right up against the wall. As I felt the entire corner of my bed sink in as if someone had just sat down, I freaked. I lost it and freaked. I sat up with my eyes wide open, trying to absorb as much light and make out what was in the dark, but there was nothing. I could still feel something leaning against my leg, and within a second I felt as if it leaned right over into my face, and I threw myself right back down onto my pillow. I was pooping bricks, for lack of better terms. I threw my blanket over my head and held my breath. I assumed whatever had been occupying the corner of my room had gotten bold and tried to join me in bed, but that's when I realized throughout the whole event I still sensed him in that corner of my room. That means that whatever had made its way into my bed was not the same entity I had grown used to staring me down at night. No, this was something else. Now I use the words entity and sensed. Becca. Use it is the only way I can explain it. However, I never felt that it was a ghost or spirit or demon. In fact, I never got a bad vibe from any of it until that night. I was always just annoyed by it. The next morning, when I was finally brave enough to get out of bed, I told my mother what had happened. She did the motherly thing, Hispanic motherly thing anyways, and called in clairvoyant to cleanse the house. She even bathed me in some type of cleansing bath that looked a lot more like soup than anything else. Honestly, I don't entirely believe in that stuff either. I believe it is just about negative energy and positive energy. Like if you wake up and say, I'm going to have a bad day, then you will have a bad day. Or if you wake up smiling and say you will have a great one, then chances are you may still have a terrible one, but you will handle it with a much more positive attitude. However, this bath worked. I gained color in my skin almost instantly. I was more comfortable in pinks and yellow and blue clothing. I was much more alive, and everyone could see it. Not much besides that change. I stopped seeing this man in my room, but he was still around the house on the couch. When I came home or walking through the kitchen, I learned to deal with it until it finally just stopped. It all stopped. I'm not sure how this tied into the puppies I saw as a child, or the skulls and bones floating in my field of vision, but it happened and I have no explanation for it. Now you may be wondering why I am writing about this since it all stopped. Like what? That's the big deal then anyways, right? Well, I found a photo today while cleaning out some things at my mom's place. Now that I've got an apartment with my fiance, the photo is of a little girl who looks a lot like me when I was younger. and a man in a black hat and suspenders standing behind her with arms crossed. She looks to be waving at the camera, and they are positioned in front of a large building titled the New Jersey State Lunatic Asylum. This hospital is real and is now called the Trenton Psychiatric Hospital, still operational. However, this photo is old, and on the back of the photo are the words "he was never there." The photo was in an envelope with "you asked" written across it. Now I don't know what to think, but I am going to do some research on this place and see if I can figure out why someone who looks exactly like my younger self is in this photo with the men I know but have never physically met. I am looking for all the help I can get. I can. How this story isn't your average scary tale, but it is real. I need answers. I need to know why I went through this as a child. I need to know what sucked the life out of me so many years ago, and what made it so easy to get back, and why it all just stopped. I wouldn't care anymore if it wasn't for this photo. Also, I can't be the only person who has experienced something like this, can I? Like many other users on creepypasta, will use this as a way to document what I discover. Until then, Story 3. Working at a cemetery is a unique experience. So I work at a Pine Lawn Memorial Park to be exact. My family has owned it for nearly 5 generations, and I've been working there since I was 12, officially since I was 15. Cemeteries, I know, are sort of inherently creepy, and despite my family being in the dead people business since long before I was born, I still have always found it to be a weird place, and for much more than the obvious reasons I posted a couple of my stories related to Pine Lawn here in the past, but I decided to put them in a more concise format, as well as add several more. Growing up, I heard stories, plenty of weird things that happened at the family cemetery. One thing I'd always been told is that even though weird things happened, no one that's ever worked there had ever been harmed. Other people are another story. I suppose I should begin with the very first one I ever heard, per my mom. Some weird stuff had happened before this, I guess, but since it was the first story I ever been told about Pine Lawn, this is what made me weary to ever be there by myself or at night. Something like 100 some odd years ago now, the cemetery was obviously much smaller than it is now. At time, there were around 120 bodies buried here. Apparently, the city wanted to develop, and they wanted to buy the particular land that my family owned, effectively shutting us down. My family bought it, and a deal was reached to sell them the land we had if the city would then also pay a portion of the land next to it, on which my family could continue the business. The city acquiesced, and they partially paid for an equal amount of adjacent land. My family, at that time, also bought several more acres past that, which we're still filling up to this day. Anyways, and that happened, my family had to inform all the other families that the remains of their dearly departed loved ones were going to be moved into new plots. Work began on that, and as bulldozers and other large shoveling equipment wasn't yet common, it all had to be done by hand. All went well for the first roughly 2/3 of the moves. The ground was dug up, the caskets were retrieved, and they were moved, along with their headstones, down to the new, freshly dug plots. The final third is where things got weird. Back then, caskets were generally made of wood, and rather than crafty woodwork designs made, a decorative cloth was laid over it. These wooden caskets more often than not weighed roughly equal to or less than the body they contained. All this is to say that in many cases the weight of the body inside was discernible from the casket itself. Well, when they got to that final, northernmost third of the land that the city had bought the caskets back, lighter the sounds of the corpses within, for example, slight sliding, a jerky step, making a limb fall to one side, hitting the inside of the box, etc., began to become fewer and farther between. Eventually, with the last 20 or so caskets, they felt like there was nothing inside at all. With the permission of the families, the cemetery employees opened these caskets they thought were empty and found just that to be the case. The insides of the caskets were bare and looked as if there hadn't ever been anything inside them. This was quite a bit of a scandal, as I am sure you can imagine. My family, both publicly and privately, swore up and down that the land had been untouched since the caskets in question were buried, and that the absence of any contents as well as the cleanliness of the caskets themselves was simply impossible. It took some years for the reputation of Pine Lawn to recover, but alas, it did. My grandpa worked at Pine Lawn starting in the 60s, but lived there his whole life. The house that my family built on the property one that I actually live in now. It's been passed down generation to generation. His abo, at 30 yards back from the main office. His room was on the second floor, facing the cemetery itself. By then, some 40 years after the missing body incident, the cemetery had grown quite a bit alongside the town city itself, with several hundred burial plots. Just before they begin, there is a thin concrete walkway about 20 feet from the main office leading from the road that goes through all the different ENT sections. Back then it wasn't split up into sections, but there was a main road around the area of plots. On either side of that walkway are two huge trees and a lamppost. One night and they were kids, my grandpa and uncle were up late. My uncle happened to look out their window and swore to my grandpa that he'd seen someone walk behind one of the trees, the lamppost illuminate, had the very first handful of plots and headstones on the other side of the road, but at that point they were undisturbed. My grandpa and uncle stood at their window for a little while with my GR, and Pa ultimately teasing my uncle for being scared. However, when they woke up the next morning, the police were there. In the hours between when they looked out the window and saw the burial plot as undisturbed about 4 a.m. and the time they noticed the commotion about 7 a.m., 7 of the plots had been dug up. The headstones were stacked very deliberately, like a house of cards, and behind them the caskets were atop one another, the first one laying flat, the next one straight up, then flat, straight up, with the final one flat, with basic casket dimensions taken into account. That's nearly 30 feet high. I'm sure you can imagine, even with machinery in the present day, that would take at least a little bit of time to accomplish. But no, back in the 1950s, this was somehow done in a span of less than 180 minutes, with no one that lived in the house able to hear it going on. I suppose I should tell you one of my own. Obviously, as time has gone by, improvements and additions to the cemetery have been made, namely the crematorium. I've had a number of odd experiences with our crematorium, which was built on as an extension of the main office. One such instance was in 2012, following a funeral for a very large man, roughly 375 pounds. I got the retort cremation chamber preheated while my wife, then girlfriend, Kimmy, set up a movie to watch while the body was being cremated. She was nice enough to wait with me. I used the elevating platform and then slid the body in, closing the door to the retort afterwards and going to sit down. About 5 minutes after I'd shut the door to the retort, while Kimmy and I were beginning to watch the movie, we heard a thump. Neither of us paid it much mind, but a few moments later there was another, and then another. I stood up, worried that the man may have had a pacemaker still in his body, however unlikely, as he had had his organs removed. As we got up and walked over to the retort, the thumping and thudding got more hurried. We looked through the front window of the retort and couldn't believe what we were seeing. The body inside was flailing at both of the deceased's arms and legs were bouncing around like he was in extreme pain. Now, it isn't odd to see body parts move while the body is being cremated. As the limbs are broken down, they will often contract as muscles and tendons snap. But this was most decidedly not that. I went around to the side of the retort, where we have 3 longer windows that give us a profile view of the body. The dead man's fingers were balled up and fists and were banging against the windows, and his legs seemed to be kicking downward as if to get out. As I watched from the side, the man's mouth opened and first groans began emanating from within, then screams. The man had been confirmed dead nearly 80 hours prior. There was no way, absolutely no way whatsoever, that he could still have been alive. His organs had been removed for fuck's sake. But for about 20 seconds after we'd gone up to the retort, the corpse inside the cremation chamber screamed and flailed, his arms and legs about as if he were being burned alive. Then he simply stopped. Kimmy and I were in shock. Neither of us said anything for a few minutes, and when I was finally able to find words, I advised her to not ever mention it again. It was an anomaly, air escaping from the lungs, an excess of strained muscles and tendons snapping. I said whatever I could to justify it enough to move past it. Even so, it's something that has never left our minds. Another quick one was actually just last year. The addition to the main office that contains the cremation chamber naturally has an exhaust. I was sleeping one night, late November, when Kimmy shook me awake. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me to look at the office. I got up and went to the window and saw that from the exhaust there was thick smoke pluming out as if a body were being cremated. Seeing as we're the ones who operate the crematorium, and neither of us were there, this absolutely should not have been happening. I had Kimmy call the police while I went over to check on things. A fire of over 1,000 degrees was likely burning inside. One way or another it had to be. He turned off as quickly as possible. At the very least, controlled. All the lights were off and the doors were locked as they were every night. I went inside, and the inside of the retort was bright with flames, but there was nothing inside it. We meticulously cleaned the cremation chamber after each use, and while the flames alone would likely produce some kind of smoke, the smoke that we saw coming from the exhaust was the kind of thick, gray and black smoke that could only be produced by something actually physically burning. I shut it off and went around to check the windows and postern doors, which were all intact and locked. There is a ladder that leads to a ceiling exit, but that too was locked from the inside. The police showed up and took a report, but their W has really nothing to be done. It was attributed to someone having left the retort on me for leaving, even though Kimmy and I both knew the other hadn't done that. That's one that I'll forever ponder. I have many more, both from my own experience, namely the mausoleums, Halloween nights, and the grass being cut, and instances passed down from my family from years ago. I'll work on hipping those up and posting them soon. Story 4. Faustian. Boxing, I could feel his muscle tissues collapse under my force. It's ludicrous these mortals even attempt to enter my realm. Mike Tyson, Round 0, the singular incandescent light bulb isn't nearly large enough to illuminate this dingy locker room. Darkness surrounds both me and my trainer. It seems like nothing in this universe exists so than us. He finished taping up my hands and starts lacing up my gloves with a grave expression on his face. He looks directly into my eyes and reminds me of what I'm supposed to do. Okay, kid, make it respectable for the first 2 rounds. Don't get too cute with this guy. He doesn't know the fight is fixed. Go easy on him and he is likely to bash your face in. I know we already went over this. Ignoring me, he continues. In the 3rd round, you go down and you stay down. Your contract will be fulfilled then, and this demon will be out of your life for good. We exit the locker room and walk down a short tunnel. Bright blue lights are scattered all over the smoke-filled arena, and I feel disoriented. To make matters worse, the crowd boos me as they throw "Are-you?" in my general direction. I desperately scan the crowd for my wife, but I can't find her. I know she is in here somewhere. I really want to see her face one more time before the fig. HT begins. Once I step up into the ring, I can see my wife from the higher perspective. She is 5 rows back and looks terrified. Sitting next to her is a middle-aged man with slicked back gray hair who is wearing a black suit and tie. He looks like a stereotypical mafioso. If only that were the case, everything would be so much simpler. Get your head out of your ass, my trainer yells at me. You can't be worried about her now. If you want to help her, you need to concentrate on the fight. Round 1. My mind isn't on the fight at all. I'm worried about my wife and that thing sitting next to her. The ringing a bell nearly sends me into a panic as my opponent comes straight towards me. I'm taller and have a reach advantage, but he is more compact. Halfwayin. Might by a few pounds. My plan for the fight is simple. I'll dance around him for a couple rounds, keeping him at bay with my longer reach. If he gets too close, I'll clinch and not let go until the ref forces us apart. 30 seconds into the fight, my plan literally goes straight to hell. My opponent is much stronger than I assumed and preternaturally fast. His left hook catches me on the chin, and I go down. Everything went red. 1, 2, 3. A brief vision of intense burning and pain. Not for me, but for my wife. Flames engulf her as she screams in agony. I want to help her, but I can't. An overwhelming feeling of helplessness looms over me so terribly that I feel like I'm having a heart attack. 4, 5, 6, I'm back in ring and I gasp for air. My trainer is screaming at the top of his lungs for me to get up. I oblige him with a Pavlovian response as I jolt back onto my feet. The referee grabs both of my wrists. "Can you continue?" I nod my head and he signals for combat to resume. Somehow I survive too. The end of the round, I actually get a few good combinations in, which is the only thing that saves me. My opponent definitely won the round though. Ooh, my left ribs hurt every time I breathe. My head still feels fuzzy from his love tap on my chin. Round 2. Damn it, kid. Weren't you listening to me? I told you not to. Get cute with this guy. No more dancing around and clinching. My trainer yells. I respond by spitting blood into a bucket. He continues. "Okay, you just need to last one more round then. You are home free." "You can do it, I know you can." I resist the urge to look over at my wife and her captor. Not looking makes me feel even worse. I sense an evil presence in that general direction, intense feelings of sadness, despair, fear, loneliness, and hopelessness suddenly overcome me. I note some trick the gray-haired man is playing on me. I need to fight these feelings. I must go on and finish this round. The bell rings and my opponent makes a beeline for me. I can sense murder in his heart. No, it's not murder. Murder is a human emotion. He looks more like a crocodile. He heading straight for its prey. Sheer predatory instinct trying to kill me. This fear keeps my adrenaline up, and I get a few good punches in. My left hook connects squarely to his temple, but somehow he isn't phased. Before I can follow up with a combo, he dishes out multiple body shots and a glancing uppercut to me. The crowd roars its approval. They can smell blood. I desperately tie him up. In a clinch, my ribs hurts worse than any pain I've ever felt before, and that's saying something because I've been lots of fights. I'm lucky his uppercut didn't fully connect or I'd be dead. The referee pries us apart, and we trade several more punches. Right as the bell rings, he hits me in the ribs again. I'm blinded with pain as I double over. I stagger back to my corner and collapse onto the stool. Round 3. "Okay, you did it. You are home free," my trainer says as he massages my shoulders. At the next reasonable punch he throws, you hit the mat and you stay down, paying no attention to my pain. I consider the gray-haired man sitting next to my wife. Even though I still feel his malicious presence, he doesn't scare me anymore. I'm about to live up to our end of the bargain, and soon he will be out of our lives. Once and for all, the bell rings, and I am practically smiling under my mouth guard. All I have to do is let this guy punch me. Lines take a dive, and it will all be over. 8 seconds into the round, he catches me off guard with his deadly uppercut. Before I know what's happening, I'm lying on the mat. Perhaps it's my endorphins kicking in, or perhaps it's a result of my brain rattling around inside my skull. But for whatever reason, time seems to slow down to a crawl. 1, 2. A distant voice is screaming, "Stay down. Stay down." I wonder who is yelling at me. Where the hell am I? 3, 4. I remember a nice gray-haired gentleman coming to me, my wife, several weeks ago. He had a ridiculously strange offer for us, something involving a whole lot of money. We signed some meaningless contract, and I am supposed to do something during this fight to fulfill the contract. 5, 6. There was something in the contract about her soul as collateral. My wife thought it was a joke or a prank. We figured there was no harm, though. Perhaps it was just some kooky old man who had too much money on his hands. We were quite shocked when his check cleared several days later. All of our money problems had been solved. 7, 8. I get up onto my knees and I don't know what to do. The blow to my head left me feeling confused. I need to do something to fulfill the contract. I just can't remember what. Am I supposed to win the fight? 9. I spring to my feet. The referee looks shocked that I'm able to continue. Are you sure you can go on? I don't understand a word he says, but somehow I know to nod my head in response. Pure instinct is taking over. I've been a boxer long enough to know how to fight. While hurt, I'm sure I have a concussion. That's why I'm confused. My body is operating on pure muscle memory. My opponent is already standing on the ropes with his hands up, celebrating victory. He looks annoyed that I'm back on my feet. He moves in to finish me with a deadly flurry of punches. He throws a punch, and I block it. I easily block his second and third punches. I'm in the zone. When he throws his uppercut, I dodge to the side, and I hit him with one of the best right crosses I have ever thrown. He goes down like a sack of potatoes. Euphoric rage envelopes me as I stand over his unconscious body. The referee shoves me towards a neutral corner and ceremoniously counts to 10 before declaring me the winner. Oh my God, what have you done? Cries my trainer. I did it. I won the fight. I run over to hug him, but he looks afraid of me. Before I can get within 10 feet of him, he hops out of the ring and runs towards the locker room. Instead, I go to look at wife, my fists in the air signaling triumph. As I lean on the ropes, I look in her direction only to find that her seat empty. Post-fight analysis. By the time I make it back to the dim locker room, my trainer is long gone. My faculties are slowly coming back to me, and I feel a gradual sense of growing dread. Something isn't right. I wasn't supposed to win the fight, was I? Realizing my mistake, I feel sheer panic. I sprint back through the tunnel and into the arena. Most of the crowd has already cleared out, so it shouldn't be too hard to find her. A few stragglers want to congratulate me on my victory, but I don't care. I frantically run to the seat where my wife was sitting, but she's not there. I make a giant loop arrow on the arena and then the balcony, but there's no sign of her. I sprint out into the lobby, and she's not there either. My vision is blurred with terrors as I dejectedly walk back towards the locker room. This can't be happening. It just can't be happening. I didn't mean to win the fight. I was confused. I didn't know what I was doing. Opening the locker room doors, I see a blurry figure standing directly under the gentle light of the locker room. My vision clears as I wipe the tears from my eyes. It's my wife, and she is facing away from me. I run towards her and scoop her up in a giant bear hug. Thank God you are okay. I was so worried about you, I exclaim. She doesn't embrace me back. I slowly place her down and examine her closely. Something is seriously wrong. I feel ice water running through my veins. The hair on the back of my neck stands straight up as I gaze into her dead, soulless eyes. Story 5, Blue Dot MP3. I was playing with a couple of my friends walking down the empty streets of small-town Bennettsville, South Carolina, when I noticed something out of place in a small alleyway beside the town cafe. I paused. Hey, is that a computer? I asked. pretty much talking to myself but earning curious glances from my two friends I don't know. Go check it out, Bun. Emmy replied, looking at the pile of electronic just inside the alley. I sigh. Of course she would make me go look. I walked carefully as not to fall and bruise, something like I always managed to do, and squatted beside the computer looking it over. That's weird. The computer was completely unscathed and seemed to be in pristine condition, even having all of its parts. I picked it up slowly and walked back to my friends. Let's go to my house and if it works, I said, breathing a little deeper because of the effort of holding the computer. My other friend, Jeff, laughed at my strained expression. Let's get something to carry it first, he said, looking around. Being a small town, it wasn't hard to find a small shopping cart rolling around in an abandoned shop. We piled the computer into the shopping cart and headed back towards my house, where we cut it up and pressed the power button. At first there was nothing but the soft tap of rain against my roof and the whistle of wind across the rusty storm door. Emmy sighed. "QSS, that is why they threw it away," she said, disappointment apparent on her face. I was about to reply when suddenly the computer let out a soft hiss, like an angry animal, and the screen slowly began to fade white. There was no startup screen, only a white page with nothing else on it. Then a small file popped up in the middle of the screen, but we knew something was wrong when we saw it. Instead of a small manila folder, like it usually has for files, this file was just a bunch of papers lying on the screen, covered in some rusty red color. I stared at the file for a moment. Under it there was a simple title, Blue. Emmy spoke, and certainly from where she watched over my shoulder. I don't like this. I nodded silently, unable to speak. Jeff, on the other hand, just grinned. "I wonder what it is," he chirped excitedly. I could never understand how Jeff was always so happy about everything. His grin just widened as he saw my confused face. "Click it," he said, leaning down closer over my shoulder. I bit my lip in apprehension, but followed his orders, double-clicking the small file. The file opened and showed the text documents with readable names and an MP3 file simply named Blue. Just like the folder, I looked at the weird text documents, trying to decipher a secret message in the symbols somehow. "This is really weird. Click the song, Cassie," Emmy murmured softly, sounding unsure even to me. I rolled the pointer onto the song's icon but paused. "This doesn't feel right," I said feebly. The urgent need to shut the computer off and to run away as fast as possible. Jeff just rolled his eyes and put his hand over mine on the mouse, double-clicking the MP3. I shivered at his cold touch and looked at the screen. The screen stayed white for a moment and then suddenly burst into color as pictures of a young boy played alongside a chilling song. I couldn't understand the lyrics of the song, and they seemed to be in a high-pitched, almost Vocaloid-style voice. It had a sad, lonely, and melancholy tone to it, one that reminded me of my grandma, the one who died 5 years ago. Tears came to my eyes, and I took a shuddering breath, paying attention to the images. How is this possible? It was an MP3 file, wasn't it? Why are there pictures? I watched as the screen fell, up from frame to frame. The first picture was that of a young boy smiling at the camera. Next to him stood a woman whose eyes seemed to be dim, almost as if she was dead. Then it showed him sitting in the lap of a man who looked to be in his late 30s. This man's eyes held the same dimness as the woman's, and his hand seemed to hang limply off the side of the chair. The last image was that of the young boy. He stood eyes dim, just like the two before him. He looked around the age of 7 or 8, and he had a defeated look on his face. His pale eyes held nothing but an empty longing as he stared at us from the computer. This image had a static-like texture, and I realized it wasn't an image, but a video. I heard Amy and Jeff gasp from behind me as the boy blinked, but I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I couldn't even breathe while I looked at him. The boy took a step towards me, and I just sat motionless, just barely hearing Emmy and Jeff's screams to run. I watched as his hand reached towards me, that song playing in the background. I felt something warm drip down my face as his hand touched the screen. Just as I thought he would jump out of the computer out at me, the screen turned pitch black, and the song faded out with one last note. Everything was silent in the room except our breathing. Suddenly a roar of clapping was heard coming from the computer, and I jumped back, finally breaking away from the trance and back into reality. Jeff and Emmy seemed to have been pulled back as well, because they ran from the door and back to me. I sat at the computer screen, and in confusion, barely hearing anything. Their words were muffled and weak, and yet they still hurt my ears. I turned and noticed that Amy was crying. I looked at Jeff. "Why is she crying?" I asked, taken aback at how low my own voice was. Jeff looked at me and grabbed my hand, pulling me towards the bathroom. He dragged me to the mirror and pointed. I looked at the small mirror in shocked horror. My face was pale, almost as white as Jeff's, but not quite. My ears were still there, but they had a small river of blood running down them, explaining how hard it was to hear, and my eyes held the same dead feeling that the boys did. I stared in terror at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked back, no emotions passing through the thick wall of my eyes. "This can't be happening," I said, touching my cheek. Jeff nodded. "It's happening all right." Emmy walked in just then. "Guys, you might want to see this," she said, looking weary and frightened. Then Jeff and I followed her back into the spare bedroom where I put the computer, and I noticed the computer had switched back on, but now the screen held no files. The only thing on it was a small timer slowly counting down the minutes to what I don't really know. Current countdown time: 1 hour 39 minutes 03 seconds. We looked at each other uncertainly, and then back at the timer. "What is it counting down to?" I asked, the most obvious question. Jeff shrugged. "Countdown till self-destruction," he asked, chuckling lightly, his own joke. I shuddered and noticed something else. "What the hell, it's not even plugged up," I said, picking the energy cable up and holding it where they could see. Emmy shuddered and stepped back. "We need to get rid of this computer," she said, shaking her head. I nodded and noticed her usually tan skin was a pale white, and her entire body seemed to be shaking. "I think you need to take a nap, Emmy," I said softly, touching her shoulder. The second I touched her, she collapsed. She fell limply to the ground, and a pool of blood spread around her as she paled even more, and all of the emotion drained from her face. All that was left was her eyes, now a dim green color, as they stared off into the distant nothingness. I let out a croaked scream and backed up, straight into Jeff. I spun and noticed that his features had contorted. He was no longer the happy Lucky teen I had known before. A huge grin spread across his pasty white skin, and his wide eyes were bordered with black. He chuckled darkly, and I stepped back, tripping over Emmy's body. "W, what the hell are you?" I asked, tears streaming down my blood-stained cheeks. Jeff let out a small gasp as he realized I could see through his mask. But I didn't give him any more time to react. I jumped up and ran towards the door, slamming it behind me, and running towards the woods next to my house. What the hell am I doing? I always get mad because in scary movies they run to the woods, but now here I am and I do the exact same thing. My legs burned with effort as I pushed myself onwards, trying to run as fast as possible. Suddenly I swerved to the left and run smack into a large tree. I feel everything swirl around me, and then it was dark. Current countdown time. 9 minutes 23 seconds. I wake up a few minutes later and hear a crack from the woods around me. I sit up and terror runs through my veins like glass. Tears roll down my cheeks as I press my back to the tree, and I close my eyes, simply waiting for my end to come. I have no God to beg to. Even if I did believe in him, what were the odds I would make it to heaven with all the sins I have committed? I am sure that I have somehow managed to commit all the 77 sins at least 5 times. Suddenly my heart began to pound loudly, so loud in fact that it drowned out all the sounds of the forest. Bottom, 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 bottom. I listened to the sound of it as I slowly began to feel sleepy. I opened my eyes and saw Jeff standing right in front of me. I couldn't think straight as I smiled at him. I felt so light and dreamy, almost like mist. Jeff gave me a huge smile and it down close so that his cheek touched mine and his breath tickled my ear. "That's right," he said softly, like a father tucking in his child. "Go to sleep with those finale words. He plunged a knife into my stomach, but I didn't even feel it as the countdown meter struck 0 and my eyes became dull. A ghost of a smile touched my face, and I looked at Jeff with a chillingly dead expression. "Good night, Jeff," I said, my voice a hoarse, scratchy sound. In the last second of my life, I saw a look of shock fly across Jeff's face as he looked at me. But then everything went dark. Earth countdown time. Hours, minutes, seconds. Story 6. The Little Religion. We called it the Little Religion because there were only 4 members. Gina, the baker's wife, homeless on Pally the Chestnut farmer, and my brother Kurt. They held services in the town square at noon each day. They were quiet with their worship. The 4 of them would sit in a circle on the grass, talking in whispers and holding hands. It became a common sight to see them there. Other than that, they spent their time doing ordinary things. Gina would help her husband in the bakery. Owen would wander the town looking for odd jobs. Pally would be on his farm. Just typical, regular things. Kurt was the only one who seemed to disappear for long stretches of time. The only other odd part of the little religion was that they never slept inside. Whether it was warm or pouring rain, all 4 of them could be found sleeping under the stars. The rest of us in town went to church every Sunday. Once I saw Kurt walking down the dusty path away from the church. As we walked towards it, I raised my hand to wave to him, but Mother quickly slapped it away. My parents didn't like to acknowledge him at all since he stopped going to church, but Kurt still smiled and waved anyway. His kind eyes fell on me, and he said, "Many sunny nights, Destine, I warmed at the sound of my name in his voice. I had always loved Kurt. He was the perfect big brother. When mother and father kicked him out of the house, I mourned as if he had been killed. Now I only saw him in passing, but every interaction was precious to me. That day at church, the sermon was about otherness. It seemed to be a common theme as of late. I only half listened. Instead, I watched Gina's husband, Rick. He sat in the front row, absorbing every word. I think he felt an added pressure to appear devout since his wife no longer attended services with him. I can only guess that everyone was trying to stay as close to God as possible. The church had never been fuller since the little religion sprang up. And then there was the issue of the rumors. They worship Satan. I heard Mother whisper to Father one night. I heard they sleep outdoors so they can be closer to Lucifer. Hey, the men at the shop were telling me so as well. They say Pally has been killing off his goats and then fucking them before they even go cold. I tried to sleep, but I had horrible nightmares of dead goats. One of them rose up and gored Kurt in half. I kept closing my eyes and seeing Kurt bleeding out of two identical holes in his chest. Even still, he was smiling and telling me, "Many sunny nights, Destine." The rumors continued and got worse. My friends would murmur about Gina killing the baby rabbits in her garden and then carrying them around in her mouth. It was said that Owen snuck into people's houses at night and left blood trails on the furniture. A grain farmer blamed Pally for his bad crops, accusing him of putting a curse on his family. And then there was Kurt. Was agreed that he was their leader. My teacher explained factually that Kurt had sold his soul to the devil and his penis had grown 2 feet long. His carnal appetite was insatiable and he took young women into the woods for unholy relations. I knew this wasn't true, but I said nothing to any of it. I knew that if I spoke out of turn, the rumors might turn to me. This is how it was for a time. The little religion continued its small rituals and cultivated a growing fear. In the townsfolk, rumors and accusations flew from every mouth, but it always ended at words. The practitioners were clearly not welcome, but nothing had physically changed. That is, until Matilda J. joined the little religion. Matilda had small eyes, the same color as her mousy hair. She had nervous fingers that were constantly moving. She had a bad habit of cracking her knuckles during the quiet parts of church. She was 24 and still living at home. Her social abilities lacked any sort of grace, but we put up with them. After all, she was the daughter of the minister. When awkward, lonely Matilda sat down with the little religion at noon one day, the town erupted in disgust. The accusations had been confirmed. They had corrupted poor Matilda. They were trying to ruin the ministry and cast out God's children. Suddenly we cared about the stocky daughter of our minister. And I have to admit, something also changed in me. It wasn't hatred or fear like the others. It was curiosity. That night, I snuck out of the window and walked along the edge of town. I walked by the bakery and saw Gina sleeping soundly on a bed of rocks. Her face was peaceful. I passed Owen swaying drunkenly on a bench. He sang nonsense words and sipped brown liquor out of a bag. I made my way to the church where Matilda was trying to get comfortable on the sweety ground. "Hello, Matilda," I called to her quietly. She rolled over and smiled at me. For some reason she seemed less odd. Her face was softer and her demeanor less austere. Her voice carried on the windless night. "Hello, Justine, out for a walk?" "Hey, I can't sleep." She sat up gracefully. I used to have a hard time sleeping as well, until I found the others. I had stopped walking and now stood almost directly over her. "Yes, Kurt and them all. I feel free for the first time," she grinned. "You should try it, Justine. Just head to the car. Past the fields on the north, you'll find what you're looking for." Images of dead goats and sex floated through my mind. "Hey, maybe I will." "Good night, Matilda. Many sunny night." S. Justine. I wanted so badly to go back home. Into my bed I knew what to expect. There in the far cave I knew nothing. If I trusted what the townsfolk told me, Lucifer himself could be there, waiting for me. But what if RT was there? My feet made the decision for me. I started my way across the fields. They were wet with the humidity. Summer's woolen blanket had draped upon the town. Even this late at night, I began soaking through my dress. My stomach protruded and nearly burst the center buttons. The fields were wide and empty. They had once been home to a plethora of horses, but a break in the fence had been too tempting for any of them to stay. No one had moved any other livestock here. It just sat sullen and green. The nettles reached for my shins, but I carefully avoided their touch. I found myself at the mouth of the cave in no time. There was a fire illuminating the stone walls. Men were speaking from deep within the cave. I hovered near the entrance. I recognized one of the voices as my brother's, so I entered cautiously. "And what did you want me to do?" Kurt sounded annoyed. I moved with my hands along the walls to keep me upright. "Tell her." "No, tell her to go the fuck home." I didn't immediately place the other man's voice. I wondered if it was Pally, but I could have sworn I saw him snoozing on a hay bale outside his farm. I couldn't say no. Not in front of the others. I heard movement from the men as if they were pacing. "Now what?" "Kurt, you've ruined it. You're going to get her killed. It's not my fault you can't control your people." I had never heard Kurt yell like that. My spine tingled. Uncomfortably, I shifted behind a boulder, and the scene lit up before me. Kurt stood angrily opposed from a man who had his back to me. There as a scattering of food and other household items on the floor of the cave. The fire beckoned to me with flame-licked fingers. I crouched down a bit more. Kurt put a hand to his head. "'Kay, I can fix this. I'll drive her out." The man stood still. "I think it's too late. The townsfolk are to the point of violence. They want you and yours gone." "Fine." Kurt extended an open palm. "Pay me what you owe me, and I'll leave." The man laughed. "You think I'm still paying you after you co-opted my daughter?" The minister turned, and his face was plain to me. His features were twisted into something less than kind. I should have been shocked to see him, but instead I felt a knot rising in my throat. Kurt stepped forward. "We had an agreement. I start this little cult, get the others to flock back to your church, and you give me enough coal to get Justine out of here, you stupid boy." The minister loomed over him. "Justine is practically popping. You think I'd ever let her leave with you? I know your secret, you." Kurt decked him square in the jaw. The minister fell like a tree in a storm. I gasped, and Kurt turned to see me. "Justine." I stepped forward slowly, my dress clinging to my abdomen. Kurt rushed to my side. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." I looked down at the minister. His jaw was crushed, blood pooled at his head. "ITU." And back to Kurt with tears in my eyes. "I thought you left because of me." No, I would never leave you. I just knew we needed money to get out of here." He came to my side and cautiously placed a hand on my lie. "I confessed to the minister the day after you told me. He gave me two options. Either be exposed or do this little religion he had cooked up. He figured the town needed a common enemy to get him back to God, but it was all for you, Justine. It always has been." I took his hand in mine. It felt good, strong. I bent down slowly, careful of my swollen belly, and plucked the keys from the minister's belt. "I know where he keeps the collection plate. That will be more than enough to get us off to the next village." I looked into Kurt's eyes, my love's eyes. "We will raise this baby like we always wanted to." His face softened, and a tear fell. "We'll get back to those sunny nights, Justine, when it was just us falling asleep beneath the stars." We Washington looked out of the cave holding hands. It was still dark, but we had many miles more to walk until morning. As long as I had Kurt beside me, I knew I could do it. I felt a small kick and knew God was beside us, too. Story 7. Sacrifice to Malachi Locke. If you are reading this, then it means Malachi Locke has chosen you. I write this so that when the time comes for you to make your decision, you will be fully informed. I wish you all the best, my dear. I know you will choose right. Malachi will come for you when you are not expecting it, when you have just begun to accept the mediocrity of He and your place in it. You will likely be young. He tends to choose his lovers young, for which you should be grateful. In fact, I guarantee that no matter what age you are when he takes you away, you will wish he had come sooner. If you are 18, as I was, you will wish you had been 16, and you will wish 14. The life you had before meeting him will seem so worthless, so contemptible to you that you will despise every year you spent away from him. But that, I am happy to say, will be the only regret you ever have. Life with him will be a waking dream. He will take you anywhere in the world that you ask him, to places you have only ever imagined. He'll give you anything you want. Although you will only want him, you will live with him, eat with him, sleep with him, and wake every morning to find him still there, still loving you faithfully. And he will need only one thing in return from you, like a gentleman. Malachi will not bring it up at first, but as the days go by, you will see him begin to change. When you met him, he looked 25, 30, perhaps, but now he will look older. Silver threads will shimmer in his hair, lines will cross his face, his skin will thin, bones and tendons emerge, and you will worry. He is aging before your eyes, and you will fear losing him, so of course you'll do anything he asks to make him well again. All I would advise for the first time is just to relax. Let his fingers trace your throat. Perhaps turn your head to the side so he can press his lips to your neck. It will not be with his teeth. They're sharp, can crush bone, and he doesn't want to hurt you. It will be a tiny blade, one he'll keep on the table beside your bed, and you won't even feel the incision. A little cut, not a quarter-inch across, and then he will just be kissing you. Turn on the bedside light. Look how beautiful he is with your blood glistening on his lips. Watch as his body illuminated by the yellow lamplight, becomes younger in a matter of moments. His skin will soften, his face become smooth, his hair darken until it is as thick and black and healthy as a bull's, and he will look 21. You will soon become used to this routine. In fact, you will come to enjoy it. It is something you can give back to him to repay him for the love he shows you, and he needs so little, a few tablespoons worth of blood at a time, that you will barely notice it. Weeks will go by, and you will find yourself desperate for him to take more, as much as you can give him, for him to drink your blood by the gallon full, to devour you completely. Malachi will oblige within reason, of course, more blood, but not enough to hurt you, certainly not enough to kill you. He needs you, wants you to live a long time with him. Use scarves and high-collared clothes to hide the scars that decorate your throat, the cuts that dance around your neck. Realize, though, that even if you keep the scars hidden from view, people will notice the change in you. Not physically, but they will notice how you act around them, how you are aching whenever you are away from Malachi. You will turn every conversation to him, this mysterious lover, and the life you share together. If you try to introduce him to friends and family to quell their concerns, they will only grow more afraid. Although they can't put it into words, something about him makes them uneasy. A certain fire in his eyes, a fierceness in his laugh, something they feel is off. They will question you constantly about him, beg you to leave him and come back home. Sever all contact with them. Malachi is the only family you need, the only Friday, and you could ever want. Your lives are entwined irreversibly, and you will be glad of it. Life will suddenly seem simpler, everything thrown into perfect clarity. He will hide his failing health from you at first. Please forgive him that. It was only when I noticed the first gray hair return to his head that he told me the truth, that he couldn't live on blood alone, not forever, no matter how much I poured out for him. It would be like trying to survive on only water. He was going to keep aging, grow weaker. He would live another 3 months, perhaps 4. That's when you will have to make your decision. How much do you love Malachi Locke? What would you sacrifice to be with him? He will not die if you refuse him. You understand? He'll simply find another woman, one who will give him what he needs. But you want his love for yourself, so you will do what it takes to keep him. I remember how scared I was the night he planned the first excision. We made love first, and then he took a wooden box from the bedside cabinet. Inside were gleaming silver scalpels, scissors, curettes, and clamps, forceps, retractors, bone chisels, and needles, a bottle of pills, a bottle of alcohol, and a metal dish ready to collect my flesh. Where he cuts will be up to you. It can be a lump of tissue from your belly or breast, or one of your fingers or toes. There are lots of different options, and he will explain them all to you so that you can decide for yourself. Try not to worry. He will not need to take much. Human FL-ish, like blood, goes a long way. That first time, he assured me that an ounce, even a half ounce, would be plenty, enough to restore him to health for months more. He put 2 pills into the palm of my hand, and I swallowed them down with some of the alcohol, willing them to work fast. As my senses dulled, I heard him ask me if I had made my decision about where to cut. I closed my eyes and pinched an inch of belly fat between my fingertips. Malachi murmured his approval. That was a good place, he said. No one would see the scar under my clothes, and there was plenty of loose skin to stitch me back together. No need to be concerned, he whispered as he rubbed alcohol onto the area. This operation was so simple he could do it in his sleep. He pressed a kiss to my cheeks, to my eyelids, and then brought the blade down on my skin. The scalpel cut into my belly, and the pain shot through me, bright and clear despite the drugs. Like a coward, I cried out, begged him to stop. Such a coward, I wouldn't have blamed him if he'd carried on cutting, held me down on the bed if I tried to fight him. Cut out my heart then and there, the weak, treacherous heart that didn't love him enough to bear the pain. But Malachi stopped straight away, mid-incision. He is, as I said, a true gentleman, and he will take nothing from you that you do not freely give him. The heddle dish remained empty. He stitched me up again, soothing me with his kisses. He licked the wound, lapped up the blood that had pooled in my belly button. He told me not to feel guilty, that he still had plenty of time for us to try again, and he reminded me of my options, where the cuts could be made, the flesh taken. Again, I remind you of the decision you will soon have to make. How much do you love Malachi Locke? What price are you willing to pay? What would you sacrifice? The choice I made was the same as any lover would have done. He was growing so sick as the weeks passed by a dying flame. He slept most of the day, trembled at night in my arms. I held him close, fed him my blood, stroked his graying hair. We tried again 2 weeks later. Again, I downed the pills, drank straight vodka. The cut on my belly had healed a deep pink. I closed my eyes, ready for him to make a different incision. The metal dish was soon full. Not quite an ounce of flesh, Malachi said, but it was enough. He ate it raw, while I lay there and watched the strength return to him. He was so very grateful I would have plenty of time to heal, he assured me, before the next operation, another 7 or 8 months before he'd need the feed again. And that is how it went, my dear. 8 months later, he made another excision and ate 6 ounces of flesh, then 10, then a full pound. A couple of times we tried for more, once a whole 3 pounds at once. But it was more difficult, took longer to heal. So Malachi decided a pound would be the limit. A pound is what we aimed for. After that, you'll find that, as with the blood, you want to give him more than simply what he needs, more than the bare minimum. There's a certain pleasure in giving him as much as you possibly can. But now I'm too old. It was 30 years ago that he chose me. He hasn't aged, but I have, and now people who see us in the street mistake him for my son, or even my grandson. Malachi laughs, but I can see the pain in his eyes. He knows that our time together is nearly at an end. So when I am dead, he will choose another loaf. And if you're reading this, then it means he's chosen you. Malachi offered to cut piece by piece, as he tried to do the first time, so I can stay with him a few years more. But I've asked him to just take my heart and get it over with. To be cut up like that terrifies me. And besides, he doesn't deserve to be stuck with me any longer. Nearly 50 years old, and looking older every day. He deserves someone young, beautiful. That's why he chose you. So tomorrow it will be over. Tomorrow he will devour my heart, and then go to find you. I have given him so much flesh and bones and organs, too, and hearts, but now I am too old to make him any more hearts. My heart will be the last I give to him, and the largest.